It's time for my property market predictions for 2022. My name's Luke. I talk all things real estate, renovating and financial freedom. Subscribe to the channel down below. And what we're going to do in today's video is we're going to do an around the grounds of Australia's major capital cities. We're going to take a look at what I think are going to be the strong performers in 2022 and where I think some cities may fall behind and have slower growth or lower growth in 2022. But before we jump into those specific numbers, I'm going to break down what I think the key drivers are in the 2022 market and then take a look at those percentages of each of the state's capital cities to see what I think is going to happen in this market this year. So the first key factor I want to talk about is the demand equation in 2022. I think there's going to be strong demand from home buyers in the market moving forward. Emotions have been running high the last 12 months. There's been a lot of demand flooded into the market, and I don't think we're quite over that just yet. I think the start of the 2022 year is going to have the strongest part of the growth and the demand wave. And then I think towards the latter stage of 2022, as there's more speculation around interest rates and where the property market might go in 2023, I think that's when some of the heat might start coming out of the market late next year. Now, the media likes talking about, the doom and gloom of the property market. So the media is already reporting, pullbacks of prices by 5 to 10% in 2023, but they're not really wanting to talk about what's going to happen in 2022. And there's still opportunities, no matter what's happening in the broader macroeconomic market in property, there's still opportunities for you as an individual to make gains and to make great property purchases, whether prices are going up or prices are going down. So I still see the demand being quite strong at the start of 2022 and starting to, peter out later in the year. Big factor number 2 is the price point which investors and first home buyers compete at. Now, you might think that the highest priced properties have the most competition, but this is not always the case. What we've seen on the ground and what we see in the day-to-day of my buyer's agency is competition at that sweet spot where investors and first home buyers are trying to break into the market. This is typically your most affordable band. Up here in Brisbane, it's around the $500,000 price point, where first home buyers will get a stamp duty concession and maybe a first home builder's grant if they're building off the plan. And investors really like this sweet spot too because it finds a balance between a good purchase price and a strong yield. For example, up in the Brisbane market, you could buy a house for around $500,000 and it could rent for $400 to $450 a week, run at 4 or 4.5% yield, or even higher than that, up towards the 5% mark. So in terms of the competition at that price point, I think in 2022, we're going to continue to see first home buyers really competing against the investor market. And I see investors coming in more in 2022. We've had a strong run of growth in 2021, more than anyone would have expected. So I think there'll continue to be a surge in that price point where the market meets, where investors meet first home buyers. Factor number 3 that I think is really going to play into the market is premium locations. Now, you can't change a property's location. You can change what the house looks like, what the paint colors are, what the floors are, but you can't change exactly where the property or where that piece of land sits in the market. So what I see happening in 2022 is premium locations are going to continue to see the growing demand, and that's going to drive prices up for those key pieces of land. We've already seen, people wanting to go for that sweet spot in terms of proximity from the CBD. So can I be not too close to the city, but at a reasonable price point and near great schools, great shops, and great community? And I think those factors are going to come into play again in 2022. So where's my local parklands? Can I walk to my local cafe, my local shops, take the kids to a great school around the corner? All those anecdotal or qualitative type items are going to play a big factor in people making an emotional purchase decision. And that's what's going to drive up prices in areas when people are making emotional decisions. And the broader property market is about homeowners. And so homeowners are going to be the large demand drivers in the market. And therefore homeowners wanting to pay more money for a specific location is what really is going to drive up prices in those spots. The fourth big factor I wanted to talk about before we jump into my property price predictions for 2022 across the major capital cities is the luxury market seeing strong growth this year. Now, we're talking about $2 million plus homes. So as you can see here, here's the year-on-year growth between September quarter 2020 and September 2021. And you can see the median price points of homes for the average property in the average market have moved a significant amount. I mean, just look at Sydney, the average property at the end of the September quarter being around the $1.5 million mark. Now, what this means is I think the luxury market, so over these median price points, is going to see more demand in 2022. So in Brisbane, I'm thinking the $1 million to $1.2 million plus properties, and in Sydney, for example, $2 million plus. These premium properties, I think, are going to have a great year in 2022 because the luxury market has seen such strong growth in 2021. I expect it to continue for a little bit into the 2022 market. And homes that might have sold for $2 million might end up selling for 2.2 and see stronger growth than other properties in lower price point areas. So I expect the luxury market to have stronger growth and maybe potential higher percentage capital growth than the lower median price points. Now, let's get to the nitty-gritty and talk about property price growth in 2022. I don't think there is going to be a pullback in prices in 2022, and maybe there will be late in the calendar year. So let's start off with Sydney, our biggest capital city market here in Australia. Sydney's had some strong growth, going from a median price point of 1.15 to 1.5 million this year, and it's probably still ticking up as we haven't received the December data yet. But what I'm expecting to see in the Sydney market is another run of growth around the 5 to 7% mark in 2022. Now, although the prices are kind of out of this world in my point of view, being from the Brisbane market and being a Brisbane specialist, I think people who are high income earners and who want to live in prime locations in Sydney will continue to pay money for those spots. Locations like Mossman, Balmoral, Balmain, all of those key inner city pockets which are more in the luxury market space, I think are going to continue to go up in price in 2022. Now let's take a look at the Melbourne market. Melbourne's had a bad run of form, being the most locked down city in Australia through the coronavirus pandemic, and I think Melbourne is actually going to have a bit of a bounce back in 2022. I'm expecting around 8% or 7 to 8% growth in the Melbourne market, and I think it's been quite hard hit due to the lockdowns, but as I think Australia comes to terms with living with the virus and moving forward, I think the Melbourne market's going to open up. Melbourne's got quite a bit of urban sprawl to the east and to the north of the city, and I think land developers are going to continue to develop the land that is available there, but I think in the more established markets, Melbourne will do quite well, and around that 8% growth is what I'm expecting this year. Let's head over to WA and take a look at the Perth market. Now, Perth has been quite a volatile market over the last 15 to 20 years, being largely driven by a resources sector and mining, and focused on those major companies in BHP and Rio Tinto, and big companies moving earth and selling it over to China. Now, Perth is a beautiful location, and I think Perth is going to do quite well. I think it will have 5% growth in 2022. It's a lovely city, and I think there's great opportunities in the Perth market. It's quite a accessible city, and I think it's more similar to Brisbane and Adelaide in terms of opportunity and lifestyle. So I think Perth will do well in 2022, but do nothing crazy as well. Here are the biggest performers I think that are going to happen in the 2022 property market, and this is going to be Brisbane and Hobart. Now, Brisbane, everyone's been talking about. We've definitely seen a lot of demand on the ground in the Brisbane market. I think Brisbane's going to have another fantastic year this year in 2022, and I definitely think there's going to be a pullback in 2023 and 2024 as interest rates rise and people's cash flows start to become compressed. Now, Brisbane, I'm expecting around that 9 to 10% mark this year. And I'm really excited about the opportunities in the Brisbane market. We're seeing the ripple effect take place. Some areas are becoming unaffordable relative to the locals, and I think there's going to be other suburbs just nearby that are more affordable and are going to see some price growth this year. Now, talking about the Hobart market, Hobart is an interesting one. I think Hobart's already overpriced. It's not one of the major, in terms of population, not one of the major capital cities. Tasmania is a beautiful place, and there's some great opportunities down in Hobart and Tasmania. But I think Hobart is a little overheated. I think there's been a lot of investors driving into the Hobart market, but I also think that that is going to play out this year as well, and it's still going to have strong growth. I'm expecting again around the 9 to 10% mark, which is a bit different to some economists and other property commentators, but I think Hobart's going to continue on, even though I don't see the fundamentals aligning in the market quite right. Now, I'm going to run through the other major capital cities. So I've got Darwin, Canberra, and Adelaide. Now, Darwin and Canberra, I'm expecting to the 3 to 4% mark in terms of capital growth. Darwin's not the most active market in Australia, and Canberra has quite high income earners with our politicians down in Canberra. But I'm expecting, average growth in those locations at 3 to 4%. Now, Radelaide, or Adelaide, I like to call it Radelaide. I think it's pretty hip and cool. I quite like the Adelaide market. I feel like it's a baby Brisbane. I feel like it's going to have its time in the sun in the next decade, but I think Adelaide has some great opportunities. I'll be buying less than 20Ks from the CBD. If I can go to the Bayside, I would, or the water. There are some good opportunities along the train lines and public access and transport in Adelaide. So I'd be sticking closer to the CBD because there's less urban sprawl and less population, but there's also some great opportunities in Adelaide as well. So all in all, looking at some growth across all of the major capital cities in 2022. I'm not going to forecast out to 2023. I think there might be a pullback with the markets and interest rates in that year, but the market is unpredictable, as we've seen, so we'll have to wait and see what happens. Drop a like on this video if you found it interesting and useful, and subscribe to the channel down below, and click a video over here if you want to see my top Brisbane picks for 2021 and see how they went this year. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.